Hello, my name is Tyler Hardcastle. I am a junior here at the University of Indianapolis, and what I will be talking about today is street gangs in the United States. So, first off, I would like to let you know what the definition of street gangs is according to the National Institute of Justice. So, with that being said, it is an ongoing organization, association, or group of three or more persons, whether formal or informal, having as one of its primary activities the commission of or more of criminal acts having a common name or common identifying symbol, and whose members individually or collectively engage in or have engaged in pattern of criminal activity. So in this definition, you can see the common name or common identifying sign or symbols. The name is just to differentiate one gang from another. The signs, you'll notice that people go out there saying like the hand gestures that they do. The one that's primarily that I've noticed is the Bloods one. Obviously not going to do it on camera. And then they have that to identify with one another. And they also have other hand gestures that identify criminal acts. Street gangs have been growing continuously, and they are one of the major influencers in drug trafficking. So we will be taking a look at the crime trends of street gangs, taking a look for the first thing. I found a study that was done by the National Gang Center that was found to be that on average since the year of 1996 that there's been about 27,000 street gangs that can be nationally recognized each year. This number has probably significantly gone up because the study I found was from only till 96 until 2012. As the gangs continually grow in size, they split off and into what they call chapters. And with these chapters, it is so they can gain more turf and area for them to not only make money, but to gain more power. So in a nutshell, a street gang is almost like a business, but only being involved in illegal activities. So I also found another study that found where gangs are primarily located at. In the graph, I was able to see that in larger cities, it accounted for 41.6% of the gang culture. The next, it looked at suburban counties, which accounted for 25.8%. Third, it accounted for the smaller cities, coming in at 27.1%. And lastly, and at the very smallest amount, rural counties counted that only at 5.5% of street gangs found. Now, the reason I feel like rural areas are so much smaller is just because the demographic is completely different. In most cases, it is typically way outside the city, so they aren't exposed to as what those in the suburban areas, the larger cities and the smaller cities have to them. So it's just a completely different environment of how they grow up. Also, it was found to be that there are roughly 850,000 active gang members. As of 2012, I'm sure that with inflation on how street gangs have become more popular and more of a diverse thing, that number is probably well over 1 million. Looking at criminal acts now, the first we're going to look at is homicides within gangs. For those who don't know, a homicide is an intentional killing from one human to another. According to the National Gang Center, there was 2,000 on average, 2,000 annual homicides from 2007 to 2012. And also simultaneously, while from their study, the FBI did a study and found that there's about 15,500 homicides per year So with this information, we can conclude that there is a proven 13% of all homicides were from gang-related incidents. Now this number does not sound like a lot, but when you break down the statistics, that 13% is a lot higher than definitely what it should be, and that 13% is only what they can prove. The larger cities like Chicago and Los Angeles account for a majority of them because that is where the base of majority of these bigger crime groups are. So the larger areas, as I talked about earlier, have a majority percentage of the gang population. Now taking a look at crime trends that involved in street gangs. Like I said, a street gang is kind of like a business, so they have to keep up with the trends or adjust to conditions in order to keep a hold and make sure that they stay their reign and stay predominant in the street gang culture. The three types of crimes are primarily violent, property, and drug crimes. Violent deals with any time of manslaughter, murder, sex trafficking, rape, assault, or anything with a firearm. The next is property-related crimes. These are robbery, vehicle theft, grand theft auto, burglary, breaking and entering, and lastly, larceny. Larceny is just small theft, or it can be large as well, but it's just another form of theft. And then drug trafficking, which is now become one of the most increasingly crimes that gangs have got themselves involved in. So as of 2006, drug crimes accounted for 73.5% of the crimes that were committed by gangs. But by 2012, it accounted for 81% of the crimes. So gangs have stopped dealing in as much as the other crimes just because they realized that not only it wasn't going to be worth it in the end, but they're not making much profitable gain off of it. So now we're going to look at the crime patterns. So I placed a graph in my paper just to get a better representation, but in the graph it shows the blue line being violent crime rates versus murder and non-negligent manslaughter ratio, and both are consistently on a downtrend. There's no spike in the graph anywhere. So it just shows us, as I mentioned before, also that gangs are trying to veer away just because in certain situations they do what they have to do, but it's just not worth it for them. And then with the drug trafficking, they can get higher quantities, create higher revenue for them, as well as it's much easier to hide versus going out and killing somebody. And usually stuff like that makes the news rather much more than a drug trafficking. The primary source of my data is all from the National Gang Center, the FBI, and the federal government websites. And I thought that these were going to be best just because as far as strength, it's allowed me to give representation of many different aspects of crime within gangs, where they're at primarily, and what the gangs really are involved in. The weakness from my information, though, is that I couldn't find any data that was newer than 2014. Most of the information was done within the last 10 years, but does not give us an accurate representation of what it is the rates are in today's society. But with that information, we can base it on a trend and see where it's at and where it's going.